2024-114, an ordinance adopting the Girdwood Comprehensive Plan to update the Girdwood Area Plan and amending Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21 Land Use Planning Section 21.01.080B1, Table 21.01-1, Comprehensive Plan Elements. We'll start with introductions.
Mark Littlefield.
Scott Myers.
Anna Brawley.
Zach Johnson.
Christopher Constant. We have members of the clerk. We have members of Girdwood Inc. and the contractor and the planning staff. And on the phone, we have who? All right, no members. Thank you. Then we have what appeared to be 39 slides. If that's the case, with great expedition or plan to come back for another 2 sessions, because that's a lot. So
We have one deck and another deck only if we need it.
okay,
Yep.
great. Yeah, I went through what was sent to us and it was 39 pages slides.
Oh, maybe that's hers.
That was mine. It's a lot of maps that I'll flip through quickly.
Yeah, it's time
yeah.
sensitive. So okay, and Ms. Alatel has just joined us, and on behalf of the department, we have.
Elizabeth Appleby in current planning.
All right, thank you.
Holly Both Torres, Huddle AK, I'm the contractor.
Mike Edgington, Imagine Girdwood today.
All right, so we'll go ahead and dive right in because we just have 48 minutes left.
Okay, I'll take it away. I'm going to start. The planning department will come on in after me, and then we'll wrap it up, and then we'll have discussion. Okay. So we're here today. Thank you for having us to talk about the Girdwood Comprehensive Plan. What we're going to talk about today, well, what I'm going to talk about first is the process that we used over the past 5 years to develop the Girdwood Comprehensive Plan, including vision, goals, policies, a population, housing, and economic analysis, an existing conditions analysis, including a land suitability analysis along with that. Future land use plan map, which of course is the meat of the plan, as well as the implementation actions after that. And then after we go through like the process we used to develop this plan, which I think is important context, we'll start getting into the Planning and Zoning Commission resolution and the resulting AO 2024-114. Okay, I'm going to pass it to Mike to give a little bit of context here.
Hi, thank you everybody for having us. So the picture here is the Girdwood Area Plan, which we currently operate under, which was written in 93, early 94 and adopted in 1995. Obviously a while ago. There was an attempt to update it in 2007, which hit a funding snag. Another attempt to update it in 2012, and then the latest attempt, which we're completing now, actually started around 2017, 2018, and kicked off with a vengeance in 2019. And thank you very much to the Assembly and Mayor's Office for providing the majority of the funding for this work. Just want to say something about the
Mr. Edgington, hold on. Just know Ms. Braga has just joined us. Go ahead, Mr. Edgington.
Sure. So I just want to say something about the way the comprehensive plan is structured. So this is something I learned relatively early in the process. So there's a comprehensive plan, but there are kind of 4 top level components. One of them, I think you're all familiar with, is the Anchorage 2020 comprehensive plan, which covers the bowl only. And then there's also an update of the Anchorage 2040 land use plan, which again covers the bowl only. There is another plan for the northern communities, the Eagle River Good Chugach area plan, and actually 2 in the southern communities, one for Turnagain Arm and one for Girdwood. And this is the Girdwood component that we're updating. You may have noticed, for people who've been on the board for a couple of years, sometimes there's some discontent coming from Girdwood. Obviously, we saw this around the Halton Hills project, and I think this is partly there's an interesting duality of. I was in a couple of meetings yesterday where I heard both that money shouldn't be spent on the Seward Highway; it should be reserved for Anchorage. This was talking about Seward Highway within the municipality, and then another meeting that Girdwood is just a neighbourhood of Anchorage, and these are both true. Girdwood is both part of Anchorage and also not part of Anchorage simultaneously. It's not part of the bowl, it's part of the municipality. And that weird sort of split sense often results in a lot of frustration because the things which are different in Girdwood need to be dealt with differently, are not always easy to express or easy to acknowledge. The comprehensive plan And in fact, in Title 21 is one of the areas where the communities to the north and the communities to the south can have code which allows the differences to be explored, explained, and implemented in different ways. I think that's all I want to say in context. Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to be clear about the public engagement that happened during this plan. I think it's probably no surprise to all of you that GERD is active and engaged. We started this in 2019 with a community survey. Every household was mailed a survey physically. Out of everyone who lives in Girdwood, 732 people responded to that survey, which is a high number of responses for a community of that size. As a contractor, I'm hired by Imagine Girdwood. I'm not working for the city for this contract. I'm working for the community itself. So the Imagine Girdwood group has organized as a result of this plan update. The Imagine Girdwood community group was formed and they've met about every month since 2019, once a month. We had 4 focus groups, each focused on the plan areas: economic development, housing, transportation, recreation. There were community group presentations. Shanna did a variety of stakeholder interviews with employers and businesses in Girdwood. We had 3 public meetings, a workshop to help develop the land use plan map. And then there were one GBOS meeting, 1 land use committee meeting, and then another meeting combined where they were reviewing the final document. Also, there were thousands of public comments throughout all these review periods. In your packets, you're lucky to receive 1 round of public comments. There were 2 other rounds of public comments within that the team sorted through. So I know it's a lot, and you probably hear this a lot for plans of this nature, but Girdwood was actively involved in this process. So what's included in the comprehensive plan? There's 4 chapters: community vision and goals, chapter 2, background and analysis, chapter 3, the future land use plan map, and the chapter 4, policies and implementation actions. And I want to talk a little bit about the process that we used to get there. Vision, goals, and policies. The community survey led to a large public meeting with 100 people in attendance that we worked to kind of refine what we heard from the community survey, and we started building the vision, goals, and policy documents from that. There were about 12 committee meetings and work sessions, and then another virtual public meeting that went into the vision, goals, and policies. And the vision, goals, and policies are about similar to what you see in chapter 1 of the plan right now. Okay.
Just quickly note that Mr. Volan joined us on the phone.
Thank you. So out of the community survey and that first public meeting, these 4 themes rose to the top: economic development, housing, recreation and natural space, and transportation. And the plan is really focused around those 4 elements. And I'm just going to read you a little bit because this is important context. It's an overall a really positive vision for a comprehensive plan. Girdwood is having conversations to attempt to manage the growth they're seeing in the community. They value their small town atmosphere. They want equitable and affordable access to services, facilities, and housing that both maintain and enhance their quality of life. Girdwood is an active community outdoors. That's a large quality of life value, the reason that they live there. Also, being active outdoors, the natural environment is the basis and the foundation for both their identity and their economy. So these goals, visions, goals, and policies outlined in the plan have driven the mix of land uses and different ideas about housing implementation actions that you see in the plan. Okay. So we'll get into this deeper if we need to based on the discussion. But right now I'm just going to tell you what happened. After we landed on a vision, goals, and policy document, then we started figuring out what did we need to know in order to implement that. So we dove into a population, housing, and employment analysis. And Shanna Zuspan, she's here with Agnew Beck. She really led that analysis and investigation. What we're really talking about here is demand. What is the demand for housing in Girdwood? And being that this is a land use plan, we were starting to try to equate what that meant from a land demand perspective. Okay. So we have an understanding of, based on current, like a relatively middle ground population growth scenario. What are the residential housing demands? What are the commercial housing or the commercial land demand? And what is the industrial land demand? So we did a bigger analysis on that. You'll see it in the plan. But then in addition to that, Shanna dove into demographics. What does the workforce look like? What is the income range of people? And based on the units of housing we knew we need, what does that look like from a community demographic perspective? What kind of housing do we need to fill the gap? Whether that's low income, middle income, or upper income. We can get into all that if we need to. We're just going to keep going though. After that analysis, we started doing a land suitability analysis because, right, we first were thinking about the demand for land. So then we needed to think about this land supply. So what is there? And the land suitability analysis process briefly took a variety of environmental factors, slopes, flood hazards, wetlands, lakes and streams, avalanche hazards, in addition to some building constraints like utilities. We overlaid that with understanding. We figured out what was generally, marginally, and unsuitable, suitable, marginally suitable, and unsuitable, to figure out which lands were suitable, how much was vacant, how much was already built, and then what did the picture of available land for those uses look like. So now we knew what the demand was, how much are we going to need in the next 10 years versus what was actually out there. And the basics of what we learned was there's enough land in Girdwood to accommodate a moderate growth. How that land is developed is another story, but we just know that there's enough land available for commercial, residential, industrial. Okay. And so then we built that with a series of tables and data to understand what the actual context and amounts of land were. Okay, all that, vision goals, land demand, land supply, started working into the future land use plan map. How are we going to use this land use plan to implement the vision goals and policies? Community vision and goals, land demand, land supply led to the future land use plan map. Okay. The land use, okay, just in general, what happens with this land use plan map? We started with the 1995 plan and really tried to understand how the updated vision, goals, and policies would be implemented with a new map. This land use plan map allocates approximately 500 acres toward future housing and commercial. It simplifies the land use categories. Like, for example, housing is allowed almost everywhere in all those colors. And there's no commercial only land use designations. So where commercial is allowed, housing is also allowed. I think that's all I'll say there for now. We'll get into that more in detail as we go. And then implementation actions.
So Holly, I
yep.
think there are a couple people with questions.
Okay.
I'm pretty quiet for now. So we'll start with Ms. Barley, then Ms. Zolotov.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted, and I don't want to go too in the weeds because I can read the report, but I'm curious about, you mentioned the kind of assumptions about demographics and really, looking at who would be year-round residents in the future. I guess I wonder, was that also incorporating basically worker demand. And I bring that up because I can see, you know, we know the story of Girdwood right now is fewer and fewer people are able to live there year round if they don't already own a property. But we know there's a big worker demand and there's probably a lot of people commuting. And so how was that factored into, because there's how much land is available, what you can do with it, who's already living there, and then there's the people who don't live there yet but want to. So just curious about that. Sounds
Go
like
ahead,
can
Shanna,
answer
because
that.
I think that's the commercial land demand, right?
Well, I think Anna's referencing the housing demand.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, the population growth forecast was, like Holly said, a mid-level forecast, which included some growth. If you look over the last 10 years, though, Girdwood has actually seen a slight decline in population. So the idea is that with more housing, more folks that don't currently live in Girdwood could move into Girdwood. So there's that part of it. There's the overcrowding piece, which is some of those folks are workers who are in Girdwood and don't have a place of their own. So that part includes some of that demand as well. And then we came up with an estimate of roughly 75 units due to what the businesses said were the immediate need of, you know, housing for their workforce, some of whom live in Anchorage, some of whom are in the overcrowding conditions. You know, they would throw out numbers of anywhere from 50 to 150. We landed kind of on 75 as that middle number to document that need as well.
Thanks.
So, Ms. Alton.
Thanks. So what we end up approving is the ordinance. And the reason I want to raise these now is all of the pieces in the ordinance, well, section 3 is all about land use designations. And so I don't know if now is the right time to ask about these. I guess we have these following amendments being recommended by the planning department. Are these all amendments everyone is in agreement with, or is my email suggests perhaps not? And have they been discussed through this process, or is this an after, right? As things land with us, amendments get suggested, and that's where it's at.
So there's not agreement on all the things. In about 2 minutes, I'm going to pass it to Elizabeth and she's going to go through all the amendments. And then we plan on responding to all those amendments. Does that sound good?
Sure. I mean, because ultimately this is the document that we're going to probably be debating the most when it comes before us.
I have a question. My question is there was a slide in which you made a suggestion about information relating to the economic status of individuals seeking housing. And so is that detailed in the report, the actuals, kind of what we found in the community through all that work?
Yeah. There is a broad discussion in the plan, and in the appendix, there's a deeper discussion.
Yeah, and I'm not so concerned about people's theories of, but the numbers, like where do people fall in Girdwood? You know, the word equity was used. And I find that we spent $50,000 per child for the daycare center there. Basically, that's the Muni's investment, and we continue to hear arguments of inequitable treatment. When I try to go to Mountain View, and it's a fight to get, you know, $100 per kid. And so I would very much like to be able to explore the kind of findings of the economics of the individuals seeking housing in the marketplace. The detail, not just the pretty pictures.
So I think the detail that I can provide right now is if you look at the bridge diagram in the upper right-hand corner, that is basically taking the 302 total units needed, and of which 200, roughly 250 we're forecasting is the new housing. And it's apportioning that into 3 categories. So the orange is households who are at 80% or lower of area median income, roughly $84,000 a year or less. And the middle income is those between 80 and 120% of area median income. And then that teal is the higher income group. Those proportions are based on census data, current census data around the income levels in Girdwood themselves. And so basically what we're saying is if those income levels continue, that's the housing need in each of those groups.
All right. And so the detail is in the report. All right. Thank you. I guess those are our questions.
If I can just add one small nuance to that,
Sure.
The thing that's great about that diagram is if you plot in where current housing costs are, They sit basically at just off the right-hand edge at about 250 to 300% AMI is what's affordable now. So all that the market is doing is satisfying a sliver on the extreme right-hand corner of that arc.
Thank you, Holly.
I think I'm going to pass it to Elizabeth to talk about the AO.
Also, note Mr. Salt has joined us on the phone.
Okay. Hi, my name is Elizabeth Appleby. I'm in current planning. So my role in this plan was I was the staff person who brought this plan to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a recommendation. Oh, changes there. Okay. So these are the approval criteria in code that the Planning and Zoning Commission and the department use to evaluate the plan. So the first one, A, is met because it's necessary to address items 1 through little 4. It's the plans from 1995. That one was pretty straightforward. The remaining criteria we found to be met with the amendments that we proposed. Then I put this up here just to remind everyone what a land use designation is, because it's different than a zoning district. So if, say, a property in Girdwood gets a new land use designation, it doesn't mean that the zoning district automatically changes, but it would change the framework for future rezonings, because the code is your rezone needs to match the comprehensive plan. So it would change what the community vision for a parcel is if there was a future rezoning. Then the rest of my presentation is basically a visual representation of what the amendments are that we're requesting. So number 1 is the land use map showed potential future dedicated parkland. We're suggesting that it be shown
Mr.
as...
Appleby, just real quick, you don't have to be so close to the mic.
Oh, sorry.
It makes it clip out when you do.
Okay, thanks. I'm used to the assembly chambers where they told me to like go right up next to it. So I'm used to having to do that. Okay. So basically it's this circle here where that hatching is. We're requesting that that be shown as open space. The Planning and Zoning Commission, they did not support our direct recommendation for this to be taken out. They suggested that we work with Imagine Girdwood's contractor Huddle to figure out a solution. And Holly will delve into this more, but the solution we came up with is that they would be shown as open space, but there would still be a map in the plan that showed potential future parkland, that maybe that could be the basis for a future parks and open space plan of some sort. Amendment number 2 is for the vegetative buffers. So for the Planning and Zoning Commission, we recommended that these be removed. However, the Planning and Zoning Commission suggested, okay, thank you. The Planning and Zoning Commission suggested that we work this out with Imagine Girdwood and their contractor. So what we came to is we changed some wording where it said it would be taken into consideration for future plating actions, and it would be shown as more of a dashed line. So if we're looking at a plat, it's not like, oh, it has to be exactly here. It gives some flexibility to follow the topography with the buffer. Then the next few amendments, the planning department proposed these to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they supported them. So this one, 3A, is to change this land use designation of this mitten parcel from open space to mixed use. And that's approximately where that black outline square is. That it's currently designated for resort expansion in the 95 plan. So it's been kind of earmarked for resort use for a long time. And Alyeska does have some plans to construct in that area in the future. 3B, again, you'll sense a common theme here is our main recommendations are to change some of these open space areas to something else. It's typically either mixed use or low density residential. So for this one, we're talking about the area again in the black square. It's just west of where some existing development is. That change would keep the green area that was marked for a potential future park space that would revert to open space. And then
Can we go back to that?
Yeah.
slide? So I have two questions.
Yes.
Ms. Brawley,
Thanks. This is in general. So you mentioned allowing housing almost everywhere. I think that's a great idea, but I notice on the land use designations, a couple of them still basically say commercial or a commercial recreation. So I just wonder what is, and there's also mixed use. So what is the logic of even calling out a commercial land use designation if housing is allowed and it's by definition mixed use? You wanna take that one?
I think it's an indication that primarily it's letting planners know that primarily the community is thinking about business, but you can still have housing there. And then the flip side is, we're primarily thinking about housing, but you could have a small craft business too.
Okay, thanks. So just thinking ahead to the zoning changes that would be necessary to do this, it would still allow those as uses, and I'm seeing nods. Okay, thanks.
Ms. Zalaton.
Thanks. I'm a little bit worried about this language in number 1, this tension between future dedicated parkland and open space. By including a map that isn't consistent with the definition of open space, I'm worried, is there any legal effect of this map, right? I don't want it to be open space at some future time is recommended for development, yet it was in this other map as future dedicated parkland. And now we have a conflict because there was some community expectation it was going to become a park. And I don't like that ambiguity because those ambiguities show up in our chambers time after time for every disposal, it seems like. And so I want to ask, I guess, 2 questions. 1, what's the legal effect? And we may not know about adding the map, even if it's not the official designation. Secondarily, if that's still squishy, should we send it back to you all to do more work and talk to see if you can't come to something that doesn't have conflicting information in your actual plan?
Could I just jump on for the second item with a different hat on as a GBOS member? We're
Great.
just about to put an RFP out for a park development plan. So, and the intention is to address this issue of future dedicated parkland and try to identify that. But it obviously would be after.
And I appreciate that, but right, people use comprehensive
Yes.
plans as the document that controls everything. And when there is conflicting information in those, if your future parks plan, right, if development comes faster than that or something, we now have a conflict we could have avoided.
I think what I'm suggesting is I like the way that this is structured now. However, there is a potential escape valve of pushing the future development of parkland into this other process. I'm just saying there is an option potentially of moving it out of this.
And I guess I'm going to kick this over to legal to resolve in the meantime. A future development park plan, I don't think would have the same effect or the same legal weight as the comp plan. And so it's something to be resolved between now and when we're set to take action on this. But I think it's a concern I have raised, particularly in a community that values public space so much. Thank you.
And I'll just add the department's recommendation to Planning and Zoning Commission was to take out the potential future dedicated parkland. They did not take that forward, and they directed us to work with Huddle to come up with a solution. So that's where we ended up in the AO.
Ms. Branca.
It's a few slides back, but the little black chunk that was in the far right that looked like it was ski trails that, I don't know where it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just know how much effort and money has been put into creating those ski trails. Is that the ski trails there?
Those are planned.
Yep.
So the existing ones are further to the whatever direction that is.
Yeah, that
north?
loop right there, they call it the forest loop. That's a planned loop, but there are also existing trails in there too. So it's a area that the community values for skiing and trail use.
Thanks. For some reason, I thought you were saying that was one where build would be, and so thanks for the clarification.
There is also resort development planned for the exact same area. Alas, the conflict.
And there is an adopted Girdwood Trails plan, and the resort is aware of those where they would work those trails into their design. So I think we were at this one.
I would just note we have 30 minutes left.
Okay, I'll be pretty quick. So this is just a change from open space to low density residential. This is a map showing water sewer connections. So we think that it's a good area to keep as low density residential because it could be a place of like an incremental extension or parcel development. 3C, again, this is open space to mixed use. This is a map that shows hydrologic constraints. So it still is keeping areas within the 100-year floodplain as open space, but where there's parts that aren't in that floodplain, we feel it's appropriate to change the land use designation to mixed use. And that's about where that parcel is. 3D, so there are two different land use categories proposed, a commercial recreation and also a commercial recreation reserve. And the idea put forth by the Plan and Imagine Girdwood is that when areas in the reserve are going to be developed, they would change the land use designation is my understanding. But we felt if it's being set aside for commercial recreation, just make it all the same category and just call it commercial recreation. 3E, this one's pretty simple. This one was marked as potential future parkland, but this one's already kind of a done deal where we know it's going to be parkland, so we're just requesting it to be shown as parkland. F, this one came from HLB. They would just like the land use designations to align with the boundaries of the platted tract boundaries. The land use categories don't always follow exact parcel boundaries, so they just wanted to follow the parcel boundaries in this location. So it's about there.
So, real quick, I have a question for Mr. Voland. Mr. Voland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So I have a question, Ms. Appleby. When you were assigning low density, or I guess maybe this is for Ms. Fox Torres too, whoever wants to answer, the low density versus mixed density. Was there any analysis of where current utilities actually exist to be able to effectuate those levels of density? Because one of the concerns I have is that the area that's mapped mixed density actually has less utilities in place right now, whereas sort of that more central mapped area that's marked for low density is where the utilities exist. So how are we thinking about that issue?
So this is Holly responding. We did have those discussions during the existing conditions analysis with all the utilities, AWU versus NSTAR, the electric utility. I guess what I'm going to say is that we're not, how do I want to say it appropriately? We understand that certain areas of Girdwood have higher development costs than others. However, this was the opportunity for the community to say where they wanted mixed density versus lower density to occur, and that's the conclusion that they came to, understanding that some places might be more difficult to develop than others. Do you want to add to that?
Not about the areas, more about the term density. I think as we've gone through the process of trying to explain this project, the word density we named that poorly. We are low density and mixed density isn't actually about density. We're not actually planning to regulate the number of front doors in a structure. There was an earlier photo of a relatively large structure that can fit. It doesn't matter how many units are in it. It's the relationship of that structure to the land it's on that defines the difference between mixed density and low density. So it's not actually density in terms of number of units. Multifamily can exist anywhere, just about.
So one of the policies is to use existing land and housing stock to also increase housing. And in the yellow area, which we're calling lower density, actually the intent is for more units to be allowed in that area. It's just the constraints are going to be how much of the lot you're able to impact.
Ms. Zolotow.
Thanks. Can we go back to 3B, the slide? There,
This
yeah, well, it's right, there was something about water, yeah, so supported by
Yeah, this is
potential
water
water and
sewer.
sewer extensions to keep potential future parklands as open space land use. So I think this is where I'm having a little bit, density is a tough word. But right, it's about the capacity to which we want to develop the utilities to support the number of dwelling units versus, and so I guess what I have a problem with is this idea of using low density residential versus mixed density residential when we might be in actual control of how much could be there based on the investments put in for the infrastructure. I don't have a solve for that, but what I do have, my question in that vein is, what do we mean? What's the difference between mixed and low? Is it like dwelling units per acre? Like someone give me the salient difference.
It's going to be about impact to the site. So
It's
yeah.
so squishy. I
Well-
mean, it is absolutely so squishy, and we don't treat any other parts of the bowl that way.
Exactly.
And I guess I'm just going to share my concern, and I'm going to get over my concern by the time this comes, because I understand Girdwood is different, but this feels like a very bespoke comprehensive plan that doesn't utilize any of the development principles that we utilize elsewhere. And I understand it's different, but you also have 10 members who don't represent this area of town, and we're making very specialized rules in this plan. So I'm going to think about it a little bit more, but it is really hard to get that baseline understanding and be able to talk about how we're addressing what is a housing concern in Girdwood when we can't talk about the designation for the land use as to its development potential in quite the same way we can in much more concrete terms in the rest of town. So it's really hard, and I understand that tension. I live through Holden Hills, so.
So I have myself in the queue, and is the term density defined in the plan?
Nope.
So you have a failure here, because density has a commonly accepted definition. It has a definition in the dictionary, and apparently this definition is unique and not as defined by any other practice we know. So that's one, it needs to be defined. Second, it appears that even if we say it's just the impact on the land, it really does add up to the same concept, which is going to have a net reduction of units available. Maybe not the number of doors per se, but I think that's really when you have in the code low density, that's going to communicate to the community of builders and developers and investors and federal subsidizers one thing, even though you might have it defined differently on the page. And so what it appears to be then is that we're going to be asking for major municipal and federal support for infrastructure investment, but directly targeting the places with the largest, lowest, single familyest, low densityest homes. And so we find, I think, the potential, at least in this scenario, that we're going to once again be making major subsidized investments in single family homes or low density homes, and not kind of generalizing or sharing the wealth of that subsidy to the places where it needs, because you can't afford to actually draw the infrastructure up above the housing on the left there and into the hills. You know, if you think it's expensive to draw it from the mains down on the basin of the bowl, it's going to be exponentially more expensive to do in the places that are designated mixed use or mixed density. And so we have a fundamental disconnection here. This again looks like it is intending, whether it is or not, it looks like it, to provide major investments into large lot configurations with fewer homes.
Can I just respond briefly? I agree with you about the term density. There needs to be a better definition, and possibly a different term. The elephant in the room here is there's been a lot of development in Girdwood as a percentage of per capita, about 10 times the rest of the bowl. There's a lot of development now. There's a lot of housing going up. It's resulting in very, very few occupied housings. So the problem we're facing, I understand generally the problem in many communities is too many single family homes. That's not the first order problem. That's the second order problem in Girdwood. The first order problem is how many empty homes there are. And 90% of the multifamily homes that have been built in the last 3 years are vacant. They're not being lived in as a primary home. That's the key problem we have. If we could wave a magic wand and take the number of housing units in Girdwood and actually make them occupied, we've solved our housing problem. We cannot wave that wand, I understand, but there are a set of policies around the way the housing is used, which are even more important and less expensive than building new infrastructure and new housing. We have to address both sides of that.
I don't disagree, Mike, but what this does is it makes the investments in the places where you have this low density residential designation. And so you have, by definition, until there's a new definition, fewer units available in the place where the biggest investments are going to go from a subsidy perspective. And so that doesn't uncompound the problem. It compounds further the problem, because this, in this choice location, is where it's going to be cheaper to build bigger houses, because and it's not going to drop the price of the housing units that are bigger and more separated and have the 100-foot buffer of trees. And I mean, those sound like prime lots for just exactly the same kind of development that's been happening. And so I don't understand how that makes a difference here.
So the area that's yellow on the map, it's already developed. So it's already housing, right? And the intent is to allow more units on the area that's already developed. And then using the policies in the plan to help incentivize that potentially and limit the amount of dark homes. So that's part of it.
Yeah, and I don't know how any of this does any of that limiting of dark homes. That is a problem that I don't know how we solve with the land use plan. But you know, I don't know.
How about I just have a few slides left, and then I'll pass it back to Huddle because I know they wanted to show a few more slides. Okay.
Dan, hold on one second, Mr. Voland.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, some of this discussion has kind of gotten to where my head's at. You know, it's hard not to feel like it's a little bit of a bait and switch to say the lower density area is going to be in the already more developed area where there already are more utilities and infrastructure, and where it would be, I guess, less costly to build. So I think for me, as you know, in addition to the definition of density and what we're really talking about there, what I'm going to be looking for is a really solid rationale for keeping that low density mapped where it is, beyond just Girdwood resident preference. I mean, what are the actual factors that make the factual argument for retaining low density in that area and putting the mixed density in the area that would be much more costly? Thanks. So yeah, if the project team can provide maybe a concise memo to that point or something, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Ms. Appleby.
All right, so the next few slides that cover the remaining amendments that are already in the AO, these are just some text changes that are pretty minor. This one just wants a little tag to consider tsunami and flood hazard risks. This one, this just is updating a goal where it's not so prescriptive. It just says we would review standards so that it would give reviewing agencies and members of the public time to weigh in on what actual changes to road and parking lot surface standards would be. This one, this is what change was a result of comments from the state of Alaska. It just leaves the recommendation a little more open-ended for development near the airport, basically. And lastly, technical edits. So that's already, those are the amendments that are in this AO. And then I just have two that the department brought to Planning and Zoning Commission that were not carried forward at all. So this one is in kind of what we were discussing with like the utilities and wanting to have development near where there's already utilities. So we were suggesting to change some of the low density residential to mixed density. So it's generally there. I was looking at the area where there's already like this grid pattern. There's water sewer. It's already kind of has this like little green space even separating it. So it'd be there. We're recommending to change that from low density to mixed density. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not move that recommendation forward. And then the second one is the vegetative buffers. We had suggested to remove them to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They instructed us to not fully remove them, but to discuss with Huddle to get a recommendation. The concern I guess we still have is it's saying the average width should be 100 feet. We would like to see that width taken down. So I put a couple examples where our screening landscaping is only 30 feet, buffer landscaping is 15. And so it's where the vegetative buffers are on the map is where we're talking about. And we'd like to see that width down because 100 feet is quite a bit. And as you go west, like at some point you increase in elevation. And so if the idea is to like screen for viewing, a super wide buffer might not accomplish what the purpose was for it. Then I just had some slides showing consistency with plans and policies. So I'll skim through these real quick. Just the changes we're recommending, we feel are in alignment with the goals that are already in this draft plan. The amendments are consistent with the Anchorage Assembly Housing Action Plan, with the Alyeska Area Master Plan Modification and Development Master Plan, the HLB Work Plan, and the HLB Inventory of Potentially Developable Parcels in Girdwood. They're just shown on that map there. And then I just threw in a couple of slides that to bring home the point on how housing has increased, and it's been in the news and in a lot of our policy discussions. So that's the end of what I had. Yes, yeah.
I have a question, and Ms. Alatel is also in the queue. I'm back on the mixed density, not moved amendment
This one or
slide.
the other one. Okay. Do you want to switch? It's okay. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it was the question
Yes.
on the mixed density, not moved amendment slide.
Oh, back to yours.
Yeah. Escape.
Are you frozen?
Hang on. I think I have to escape this one because I'm. Here we go, because it's in presentation mode. And then I'll go back to this one.
All right, that's good enough.
Okay.
So inside that box, this is the area identified for a potential shift to mixed density from low density. This is all essentially for redevelopment, right? Because this land is all
Yes.
developed, right? In the north there, or yeah, I guess to the north in the green, that's all the wetlands. And so it's unlikely, and it's dedicated park according to the map. So the purpose of this is just to establish that in the developed areas, generally you can go up. Why didn't it encompass all of the developed land on that southern eastern section there, outside of the box? It's situationally looks pretty similar.
Yeah, I think if the assembly did want to suggest more changes to move more of the low density, I think we would be supportive of that. The department, I guess, overall just had some concerns where like the darker areas we're so far from where there's already utilities and roads and
And I'm not talking about the
yeah.
darker areas. What I'm suggesting is if you look at the black box, the bottom left corner, and even the whole left side of the box, there's all of that yellow. And at the bottom, there's that giant swale of yellow of subdivided, already built properties there, right? What's situationally different from those to just inside the box that are adjacent, that make it of value to have them different than what's in the box?
So I suppose you're correct that most of those do have water and sewer. When I was suggesting this to planning and zoning, I guess I was looking at taking into account the grid pattern as well. But that is correct that those areas are served by water and wastewater.
They're all
So
similarly situated,
yeah,
right?
so
So
maybe
there's nothing
appropriate.
that is distinguishable between, this isn't the right slide. It's if you go to the other slide, it's
This
that, or go back. The one that had the black box around the yellow grid there. So again, we're talking here, this was your amendment that wasn't moved, change land use designation from low to mid or mixed. And you have in the box, basically the resort in pink, the green of the park, the orange, which I don't know what that is. It's actual mixed use proposal. And then you have all of that yellow, that's the grid. And then outside of the box on the left and below the box, you have all of that yellow, that's the grid, that's not inside. That's the land that I'm curious about. What's functionally different from that? And what I'm hearing is probably nothing. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
If as someone local and paying a lot of attention to things, there is a significant difference in its roads. Elizabeth was right about the grid. The grid provides good access to the area. When the other area, the area to the southeast, was laid out, they used a very different model, and everything is basically centered on one major road. That major road is a huge problem. It takes about 2,500. It's a gravel road and it has about 2,500 vehicle movements per day, which makes it very heavy.
Clarifying question though. So there's this like smaller grid section, which is
Yes.
like in the center of the black
Yes.
box, but
Correct, and to the north.
and the north, but to the bottom left, inside of the box are still a number of properties that may not have the exact grid because they're curling or curving,
Right.
but they're still inside the box.
Yes.
And so from a maps define what can be done where. Is it then
If you-
your
if you look at
suggestion that
the-
you would
so-
change the box
No,
smaller?
If we look at this map here, this is
Yeah.
explicitly around the grid area.
Yeah,
So that
I
was the
just
suggestion from.
Okay, so the
yes,
box is
yeah. I
not
just meant the
accurate.
black boxes to be like, here's approximately where we are,
Okay,
not exact. This
understood.
is exactly what we proposed to Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, now it makes sense. Like the line does not conform to what's being stated. Thank you. Meg.
So you've said a few times, we made recommendations that the Planning and Zoning Commission said no to. Can we get all of the recommendations? This reflects what planning and zoning wanted, not necessarily what the planning department wanted. And I think that to me, like, great, the Planning and Zoning Commission is advisory to us. You aren't beholden to what the Planning and Zoning Commission says has to be advanced. It's all still very advisory. So I would like to know, or like to have those pieces that you all recommended that PZC mayors may have said no to, because we have it here in a proposal, but we don't have how it was necessarily, what was specifically there, I guess. Like, I'm getting a disconnect, and it's a bit of a process issue, and the role of Planning and Zoning Commission. I mean, it's always advisory to the administration and the assembly, and it's not prescriptive of what actually should change in what's going forward. Thank you.
And I'll just say it is in the staff report that I think it's either attachment B or C. I can follow up too and just email you directly to make sure that you don't have to go hunting for it. Yeah.
We have about 6 minutes left, Ms. Brawley.
Thanks. Yeah, the water sewer map kind of prompted a different question. We don't have to go back to it, but just in general, I know that's one of the biggest barriers to building development beyond a certain density or whatever term we want to use. So just wondering how this maps up or aligns with, like, does this plan recommend specific areas for water sewer extension? Does it get that detailed, or does it contemplate that needs to happen in order for some of these places to be built on, and or has AWWU weighed in on any planned water sewer extensions that they are working on long term? Thanks.
I'm just going to say what I said before, which is we had a conversation with all the utilities about this and asked about potential constraints. And we got into all that, and we understand where development costs may or may not be higher. However, this was the opportunity for Girdwood to express where they wanted housing and the character of their community. So we just tried to weigh all of that.
So it's more that this expresses the broad intent, and then the work would be to figure out how and when to do those
Yeah.
extensions. Okay, thank you.
Some of the work has started already with AWU, even though this has not yet been approved. And the extension of water, as you see on the left-hand side, on the west side, there is sewer, which is generally the more expensive infrastructure, but there isn't water. There's already a plan and some estimates of cost for extending water all the way down to the highway. And GBOS is just in the process, hopefully, of recommending that and getting added to AWU's capital grant requests.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thanks. I know when we were talking about the plan for today that we would set aside some time at the end for Imagine Girdwood to respond to some of the recommendations in here. And we only have a few minutes left, but to the extent that you can.
Yeah, so there's just three things we want to respond to. First is the mitten. And so I want to be clear that the things that we're talking about were things that were proposed to the community, and we received like hundreds of comments about them. Okay, so the first is 1 and 2, which were the vegetative buffers and the planning considerations for future potential parkland. We agree with those, and many of those are complete. The additional things that Elizabeth said about the buffer being reduced to 30 feet, I don't think we agree with that. We're on board with how it's written in the ordinance you have right now. The third, for area 1, the community doesn't agree with a land use designation of mixed use for the mitten. We went through a process where one of the draft land use plan map scenarios did indicate that the mitten be a mixed use land use. It was probably the most comment we received, hundreds of comments about that land use category. It was important for the community to retain that as open space. So that is one area where the community does not agree. The second is,
I want to just jump in there and say, that's one place that the respondents to the plan don't agree with. It's hard to say
Right.
broadly that the community does or doesn't. This is,
Sure.
and it's a
Yep.
nuance there, but.
Yep, I'll change my language. Okay, so then this second one, the Virgin Creek area, again, same concept. When we presented first 2 draft land use plan maps to the community who attended the public meeting in October, we indicated this area be housing, a residential land use. And again, many comments indicating that that wasn't the preferred land use type by those who participated. So that's Amendment 3B, Area 2. The people who have participated do not agree.
Can you go back to that quick and like help
Yeah.
us understand what you're talking about? It looks like a little circled spot on the far left map there.
Yeah, so that's the 1995 plan. The only digital copy of it I have has a funny little graphite pencil circle on it.
And so on the middle map, what are we specifically talking about? Is it?
Okay, so this is the figure 2, area 2 on the right. That's from the planning staff report, where it's indicated as GCR-1.
And that's the parcel boundary. That's how it got that shape.
Yeah, it's because it's based on wetlands.
Okay,
open
so
space.
that's the section that's that kind of triangle off of the
Yeah.
grid section that, is bounded by the
Yeah.
Glacier Creek.
So what I'm trying to show here is in 1995, it was designated as commercial recreation, which I think the intent really was a golf course. So then
this plan is proposing an open space designation for that.
And the
For
do
that
not
same
agree
area.
is,
The planning is recommendation is housing, residential land use type.
in GCR one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That, now I
Mhm.
understand what you're presenting.
Okay, then 3D area 4, which is the conversation about future, what are we calling it? Future, no, it's future, commercial recreation reserve. That's the area on the right with the hatch. You'll see in 1995, it was designated, I think the same, future resort reserve. Sorry, I'm forgetting my words right now, but planning is making the recommendation that we either make it commercial recreation, not future recreation reserve. So just a little bit of context, we initially recommended that whole area be open space, understanding that it could be available for resort use in the future. However, we got a lot of comments indicating that, yeah, there's plans in the future. It might be 20 years out, but there could be more resort development like up valley there. So this was one of those ways, like Meg, where we were trying to indicate, we're trying to like indicate the community vision at the time so that it's just not a blanket open space designation, but it's also just not authorized to be resort. So that the hatch indicates that if there's a viable resort expansion plan in the future, you would just have to go through an additional process in order to make that happen. So, but the communities of those who participated still indicated that it was important to show commercial recreation as a value at this time for that area.
So a quick question for Mr. Vaughan, and then we'll let Mr. Edgington have the last word.
Yeah, thank you. So isn't there already a viable plan with the resort in one of these locations? We heard a presentation from Pomeroy at one of our community and economic development committees about them wanting to put housing, I think, in one of these areas that some in the community are advocating to keep open space. Is that one of these areas? Am I correct in that?
That's not the area we're talking about now. This is like further up valley in the mountains.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
So we've kind of gotten to the end of our time. We'll let you take us out, Mr. Edgington.
Thank you. So I said at the beginning, there's this sort of interesting duality about Girdwood. There's also an interesting duality about the relationship of Girdwood to government as well. So we have a elected board in the Girdwood Board of Supervisors, which is as well as the assembly and school board and mayor are the only identified elected officials within the municipality. So effectively elected officials at the same level. They're directly elected by the people. There's been a very engaged public process. I think we had over 900 people at various points throughout the process. GBOS, I know, has heard a lot about this. I've been recusing myself on this particular issue, but GBOS has heard a lot about this, about these topics. And the reflection of what Holly said is agreed by the community is actually also supported by GBOS. So again, there's this interesting position as elected officials. We don't really have any say in what happens from planning and zoning being an appointed body. So what you have in front of you is a representation of the Department of Planning and the appointed body. And what you have from GBOS and the community generally is the opinion of that particular community. So that's just something to take into account. I think there has been a very extensive public process. And I think there's very strong voice from the community about what we actually want and what would work in the future. But it is, you're right, it is beyond land use. The policies in here are not just land use policies. They're also indicative of how housing policy should go forward. And it is a different community. I was at a conference last month for gateway recreational communities across the Mountain West. We were talking about strategic planning and housing for several days. And what was interesting is how many communities have exactly the same problem. and they are distinct from the communities that urban areas, the problems urban areas have with housing. It's a similar consequence of very expensive housing, not many options. But again, the elephant in the room here is non-occupied housing. And that really is the key thing. That is addressed elsewhere in the plan, just not in the land use maps. Thank you.
All right, with that, we will be adjourned and come back 5 after the hour for our next work session. Thank you, everybody.